Yeah, the pandemic was definitely social media at its worst. And what if we have a pandemic that's 10 times worse and extreme
measures
are...
They're going to think you're going to cause it then. Don't
That's
say
right.
that.
I'm working on it.
Don't say that. Cut that. Tell people something's going to happen. And then when it happens, they're like, oh.
This is not funny?
Content that will go everywhere. Millions of views if you say it.
And what if we have a pandemic that's 10 times worse?
And
that's right.
That.
I'm working
on it. Don't you say that. Cut that.
This is the Rebel Call channel. Welcome to today's show. Bill's working on it, right? For those of you that don't know, Bill Gates just released a new documentary series on Netflix. And to spare you from hearing any of the tidbits of it, because it's long, it's 5 episodes, I decided to watch some of it. Specifically the stuff covering conspiracy theories and misinformation, since I know a little bit about those topics. And it's amazing to watch Bill go in and out of exposing himself and, of course, using humor, as they always do, to deflect. So you'll hear Bill in many of these clips, which you must watch. You've got to watch this video to the end because I've only taken out the most important parts that you need to see of how they view us, what they're doing behind the scenes to watch us and monitor us, and of course, what the future holds, as Bill says he doesn't know what to do to stop misinformation. But him and Lady Gaga hint at what we all know is coming, the digital ID. But I'll start with that first clip, right? Bill talking about how he's working on it, right? Of course, Bill deflects and uses humor, doesn't mention at all Event 201, because that might start waking people up to what's going on. And even if he does, he knows all he has to do is laugh it off. But it's incredible that Bill can joke about the outbreak like that and laugh about it and say he's working on another one, right? It's pretty amazing that they could do that, because if I was to do a video and I was to laugh and joke, let's say about what they claim World War II was about, well, that would be considered hate speech. I would likely be thrown in a prison cell. And if I wasn't in America, I would definitely be thrown in prison, because in other countries, you can't question the narrative of World War II. Now, for Bill to joke about that, I find it pretty in our faces and pretty disgusting, to be honest, because of how many people, of course, ended up losing their lives, not because of the reason they said, for the other reason that Bill was responsible for. And on top of that, how many people lost their jobs, how many of us lost our freedom of speech during that. But it's a big joke to Bill, and it's okay for them to laugh about it, because they know if I show that clip, or at least if 9 out of 10 people show that clip, which is what they want people to do, they want people to look at that clip and then go crazy about Bill Gates saying he's working on the next one, so that they could say, oh, he's just joking, right? Bill was just joking. You're taking it out of hand. That's what conspiracy nuts do. Of course, right? That's what they expect you to do and say. But if I make points like the points I just made about, well, they were so upset about how many people lost their lives, it's pretty ridiculous that they're joking about creating another one, isn't it? So let me start by showing you some of this stuff, because Bill opens up this docu-series, this episode about misinformation, and he talks about all these conspiracy theories that are out there. And every one of them has a reasonable explanation for why these theories are out there, because of course you follow the money, you follow what these people are invested in, you follow the words that come out of their mouths, and then all of a sudden they get all upset about it because they didn't expect you to figure out what they're actually doing. So they have this thing called actual conspiracies found on the internet, and Bill reads them, and then of course he laughs them off and dismisses them and says that they're crazy and just moves on to the next one without actually addressing what's being brought up. So let's start with the first one, which is about eating the bugs. And of course Bill says, that's crazy. That's I wouldn't do something so mean and sinister. He says he would feel bad if he was doing that. Listen.
Bill Gates and the liberal world order are orchestrating a scheme to force people to eat bugs. Their agenda is to weaken the lower classes with protein-poor insect diets. I'd feel bad if I was doing that.
So of course the common person hears that and they just laugh, right? He's talking about weakening people by taking away meat and making them eat these plant-based, insect-based foods. And Bill says, that's not what's going on. I feel right, but nobody points out in the docuseries that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation invested heavily in things like all things bugs to develop a method for the efficient production of nutritionally dense food using insect species, right? That's right from Bill's own website, right? And that website is very proud, that company is very proud of what they do. Company gets grant to develop food based on insects to fight malnutrition, and Bill's invested in. And then other things that Bill has said, He said things like rich nations should shift entirely to synthetic beef, which means plant-based beef, which means we can't eat beef anymore. We can't eat meat eventually anymore, chickens, etc. That's what Bill is talking about. That's what Bill is funding. So to bring attention to it and then laugh it off, this is what I talked about with the alt-right media, eat Z-bugs. They want you to think it's a big joke, and they've convinced Democrats that it's this big joke, or, I call them Democrats, but sheeple. They've convinced them that it's a big joke about eating the bugs. When these people are putting all their money, investing all their money into having us eat bugs, and then some people go, well, maybe it's a good thing. Maybe it'll help third world countries. They have no idea the effects on the human body, of course, because these people believe in what the media tells them is good for them versus bad for them. And that's why most of them are completely brain dead. So then we move on. And Bill has to bring up the reptilian theory, right? Now, of course he does. Bill brings it up and he dismisses it and he laughs it off. And he's like, well, I have heard that one before. And of course, wow, that's really cool that I didn't know Tom Hanks joined us, and he uses his deadpan humor, or I should say his lack of humor, to address this topic.
Bill Gates is a shape-shifting lizard, part of the reptilian race that includes Tom Hanks and Lady Gaga. These lizard people are secretly exerting global control. Someone mentioned this one to me. I didn't know we had Tom Hanks in on it, though. I mean, that's great.
Right? That's great. Right in front of our faces talking about this theory. Now, I know a lot of people out there don't believe necessarily in the reptilian theories, and they don't have to. You could believe what you'd like to believe. But there is some truth to these people not being human, especially if you believe in demonic entities and demonic possession, which most Christians should believe in, because the Bible even tells us about people who were demonically possessed, and Jesus was casting out demons out of people, right? But when we look at a lot of these people, he brings up Lady Gaga. Well, there's a reason that people think that Lady Gaga's a reptilian. I mean, we've seen Lady Gaga just go on television with her face like this and expect us to not think that there's something wrong. Now, of course, the common sheeple will say, well, she just did something to troll, or she just did some weird thing. But we've seen a lot of these people, their eyes turn green. We've most recently heard Nancy Pelosi even calling herself a reptilian, right? And then in the Bible, of course, we know about the Nephilim, and we've heard about the Watchers, which they constantly reference. So there is a little bit to that. And of course, if you look at Bill Gates, it's not hard to actually believe that theory. So the next thing that Bill brings up is very interesting, because I have to be very careful about what I say here. So I'll let him speak for himself, but it has to do with immortality.
Bill Gates is pursuing immortality by consuming babies' blood.
So of course Bill laughs that off. They all do. They all bring attention to this about this red liquid that you can't mention. And anytime you really do mention it, you get you get a strike for it. So I won't go into detail about it, but I think a lot of people already know what red liquid we're talking about. But Bill, of course, just quickly dismisses that. He doesn't even say anything about it, right? Well, that's because Bill and all of his buddies in Silicon Valley are invested heavily in immortality research, right? Bill Gates on Google Calico. We've got Bezos and Zuckerberg trying to create technology to live forever. Obviously, they already have this type of technology where they plan to mix man and machine so that they can be immortal. The book of Revelation talks about those seeking death who will not be able to find death in the end time. So we're seeing a lot of this stuff play out, but it's amazing that these topics are falling under what Bill calls conspiracies. And then, of course, the audience that actually watches Bill's documentary are all these are all the sheeple that are watching it. No, most conservative people aren't, most Christians aren't. I obviously watched this episode when I saw it was about misinformation to see what they were trying to say, because they're saying a lot. And I'm glad I did watch it, because I could see some of the stuff I'm about to show you in a minute. But the last topic that Bill presents to us here in the beginning of this is about him owning all this farmland and then injecting the stuff that he's growing with something that they can do. They can inject the food supply with this RNA type of stuff. Well, I'll just play the clip for you. You can see.
Bill Gates' massive farmland holdings are secretly supplying potatoes to McDonald's, one Happy Meal at a time. I eat McDonald's.
Right? So it's out of the realm of possibility that Bill would be doing that, right? He just goes on to say he loves McDonald's. So of course he loves McDonald's because he loves fetuses. Excuse me. So Bill owns how much farmland? Well, 1 out of every 4,000 acres is owned by Bill. He owns 275,000 acres of U.S. farmland and growing. Now, is he doing that because he's starting his own farming company? Oh, of course. Well, Bill's doing it so that they could have the majority of the food supply chain under control. Remember, he controls the food, controls the people. That's a fact, because we need food and water to live, and that's why they're so hell-bent on controlling it, so they can get us to conform with the things that they have planned. So as this docuseries continues, and I got to go faster here because I don't want to lose your attention span. I know it's hard to watch longer videos, but you got to see everything in here, including the mentioning of Comet Ping Pong. For those of you out there, I'll get to that in a minute. But Bill brings up here that he has a misinformation team, right? Which is a little out there, isn't it? That this guy would have his own misinformation team if he thinks that all these conspiracies are just crazy and we're all out of our mind. Yet every time he goes on TV, he brings attention to them, which is a sign of deflection, which is a psychological sign of, when you constantly bring attention to these things, you're probably guilty of it because you're trying to convince people out there of the opposite. He's not doing a very good job of it. It's amazing that anybody out there believes this guy, but he shows us his misinformation team and how they operate at Gates's corporation. He goes in and he sits and he meets with a bunch of people who are probably listening right now because clearly they have metrics and everything that they're using with their technology is finding Bill Gates' name in the algorithm, then trying to put all the pieces together about what they're talking about so they can make sure every time they roll Bill Gates out, he could deflect off those topics because he doesn't expect you to get suspicious of what he's doing. So in this clip, you'll hear Bill Gates bring up a lot of things. And of course, he's very obsessed with this notion that hopefully that people don't think that there's some type of chip or something that's got, they're trying to insert in people. Let's just use the word nano. And he says, hopefully that's down to zero, right? And his team says, well, it's not really down to zero. In fact, people are still talking about it. He can't believe it because it's years after the event occurred, but people are still talking about it. In fact, people are talking more and more about Bill because people connect the dots and see all the stuff Bill's invested in. So Bill here and his team show us how obsessed they are with you and me and how invested they are in stalking us and monitoring all the stuff that we say. Because remember, on the internet here, we're giving them access to our minds so they could see what we're talking about and what we're catching on to. So they're trying to do everything they can to prevent us from speaking out against them so they don't lose their power and their control. And that's why Bill's doing this, because any normal person would just say, I don't care if somebody out there saying that I'm this or I'm that or, I'm a lie. Who would care? You think I would care? People have attacked me thousands of times in the past. Not so much anymore because nobody really cares anymore because of what Bill and his team have done to my content and my voice, which is really how they, that's how they control all of this that's going on, by silencing voices, right? But they want you to think that the real way that they're going to do it is with the digital ID, which I'll get into. But here's Bill and his team talking about all the metrics and all the data they use. And of course, deflecting and laughing, and Bill's drinking out of cups, smirking at everybody. I mean, it's incredible. You could just see how guilty these people are.
I think Bill's biggest concern is misinformation about the topics and the issues he works on. We're going to show you some of the things that are hot right now, inflating things into these massive conspiracy theories that include microchips, farmland, vaccine technology, about puppeteering world affairs. This is a real-time dashboard of all the misinformation about you. These are all the posts and issues.
I wonder if some things like the microchipping thing, is that dropped to zero? Or is
That's like core to so many of those sections.
This blue line is really just about climate. A lot of this is about puppeteering the food supply. One of the emerging rumors and conspiracy theories is you have engineered ticks, and they bite people. They make people allergic to traditional meat in order to drive demand for synthetic meats. Glad you're laughing. I found this to be particularly depressing.
It's interesting to know how to fight back, though. There's a lot of ways to fight back, could even make it worse.
Right. We noticed that if you do fact checking, often that's actually just highlighting the story to more people.
And then the system takes that, and it's not just the playground, it's millions of people. It's kind of human nature, but just blasted out.
When I hear you talk about the playground.
So you got to love the theory about the ticks, right? As if, they talk about it like it's pulled out of thin air. Like people just saw a tick and they're like, Bill Gates is trying to control ticks, right? But if they got the information, if the people out there listened and saw what they were invested in, right? Gates Foundation funds research to control cattle ticks through biotech, right? And most of them don't even know what that means, biotechnology. They're just like, Bill's trying to, he's trying to save the cattle so he can feed third world countries. I mean, these people are brain dead, right? Or on top of it, Bill Gates with the mosquitoes. We all know about the millions of genetically modified mosquitoes that Bill has released in places like Florida, California, and Texas, and then said, oh, no, I'm not. Had the media, which he controls, or is one of many that control it. One of many in this group, I should say. It's not many people who are doing all this stuff. Just look at Silicon Valley and the Jeff Bezoses, the Elon Musks, and the Bill Gates who are controlling this and then playing both sides. They have to come out with stuff and say, no, Bill Gates is not causing this with mosquitoes. No, Bill Gates, and that should just be another sign of confession, right? So as this moves on, there's a couple other things very important here. Okay, they start talking about us like we're children. They compare conspiracy theorists to children. And they even do this mock scene where they're reading a children's book that I'm about to play for you to the children, right? And part of the theory that they have and they're trying to convince their audience of is that, well, we want to feel like heroes. We want to feel like we know something that nobody else knows, right? Oh, we're so smart. And that's a common thing I always say is a hard thing to try to reach these people with, is because they do have this defense mechanism where, especially people close to us, right? Where it's hard for them to look at and listen to what we're saying because they're like, well, I grew up with you. How do you think you know this? And I don't know this now. And you're smarter than I am. It has nothing to do with that. But as society has become more narcissistic, that's the first defense that most of these people use. They don't want to hear any of the facts that we present because they think that we're trying to say that we're smarter and we know more than they do. And that's not the case. We're trying to wake them up. We were all asleep too. Right? There's a process that needs to occur to wake up from this. So they compare us, of course, to children, which is a common theme that I'll show you after this clip with Lady Gaga, barf bag, talking about us like children on the playground with misinformation. But they show you here monsters and how, oh, there's this group of people who are hidden and we're the only ones that could see them because we think that we're special. We're like dragon slayers. And then they end the clip by showing you this pizza place in the book. I can't even believe they had the audacity to do it, but they did. They love to bring attention to this place as if it's like well known, like everybody out there knows about this theory, like it's the UFO theory or something. You could bring this up to like 50 people, and I guarantee you maybe one would have heard about the pizza thing, but they're obsessed with it because this really started a lot of what's happening now because they couldn't believe that people were actually connecting the dots by going into their Instagram accounts and then connecting the buildings around there and the signs and symbols. Boy, it really bothered them. And they show you in this book, this pizza parlor, while of course comparing us to children. And then at the end, they say, hey kids, do you want to hear the story again? And all the kids scream no, right? Because the kids are smarter than we are, right? These kids who are getting trained this way. This is just a mind control tactic that they're using on their audience, and somehow this works.
A conspiracy theory always has kind of the same story. Once upon a time, we were happy and everything was good. Then the monsters took hold. Everything seemed fine because the monsters made sure this was all kept secret.
They could change shapes and sizes.
They're in control of the media, and so only a very few people can actually see these monsters.
If you're special enough, you could spot the monsters.
Only the heroes of the story knew the truth, and then they arrived to save the world.
The battle of good versus evil.
The end.
Do we read it again?
So incredible, right? I didn't know that, yeah, we all want to be heroes so bad. Actually, what we all want is to be left the F alone. That's really what we want. We want to be left alone. We don't care what your preference is in the bedroom. We don't care what your skin color is. The majority of us want to be left alone. And the reason that so much stuff is escalated is because these people want to be involved in your everyday life. They want to change the infrastructure, and they want infrastructure where they can control and monitor everything that you do. And that's really caused a lot of us during our awakening process to get pissed off. And that's caused a lot of us to really put our foot on the pedal to wake people up before these people get total control over our lives. So this isn't about any of us wanting to say that we're better than anybody else or know more than anyone else. This is about stopping them from doing what they're doing. And they use childish stuff like this, and it works on the liberal audience because they're children for the most part. They're adults who behave as children. So this type of stuff works on them, and then they tell them how smart they are. And of course, they all hear that, and they're like, yeah, we are smarter than everybody else, you know, because they listen to the science, and they don't even realize that all that stuff is made up. So then we move to Lady Gaga and Bill Gates, and this is big because Bill presents himself in this. Obviously, he's so full of crap. He presents himself in this entire series, in this episode, as if he wants to figure out what could be done to stop misinformation and what misinformation is like. And he already knows what can be done, and that's what the plan is, the digital ID. They want to hold people accountable for what they say online. And everybody out there is going to agree with this, but they don't realize that they're eventually going to be criminalized for it. So it starts off this way, where they force you into a digital ID, and they say, well, this is just so, you know, if you say something online, you could be held accountable. And, you know, if you hurt someone's feelings, you'd be held. And then this obviously moves into questioning the government, using, you know, speaking about your religious beliefs against certain groups and how you're not allowed to say that. Doesn't matter what your beliefs are. That's a protected group. You're not a protected group. But this is all about total control over what you say online. And Bill and Lady Barf compare this to the playground, right? And how, well, at least on the playground, if a bully says something, he has to be held accountable because he has a face on the playground and you know who's saying it. But on the internet, anybody could say anything they want. Unfortunately, it could go viral. Well, a lot of these things end up going viral because a lot of people out there feel what people like me are saying. And when they find stuff or channels like this, like they used to, they listen and they subscribe because they say, you know what, I feel like something's off and something's wrong. And this guy's really helping me piece things together and getting me to start thinking again because you guys have stopped me from thinking. And that's what's bothered them so much, is that people like me have become so popular among people. And I don't care about popularity, I care about reaching people. They don't want us to reach people because they don't want to lose their grip over people's minds. And the digital ID is the way to stop that. So listen to them comparing us to children on the playground.
I think it's not something that we can just blame social media for not making sure that they have better practices.
Well, we made it so easy to just post anything, so somebody who, on the playground would have been rude and nasty. A few dozen kids hear that, that's not great, but hopefully they'll grow up. But you're sitting in your own home. It's just, you just sit there and type.
What I think right away is, if enough people were on the playground shouting at each other at the same time, I feel like someone might calm it down.
On that playground, if, things go too out of control, there was some adult who would show up. And even when you attack somebody on the playground, you can see their face. Whereas when you're sitting there typing and you're feeling like you're so clever, you don't see that human reaction that makes you think twice about it. And even when you attack somebody on the playground, you can see their face. Whereas when you're sitting there typing and you're feeling like you're so clever, you don't see that human reaction that makes you think twice about it.
So yeah, we're like children on the playground, right? We're bullies. We're bullies for calling out the big rich people who are trying to meddle in our lives every day and tell us what to eat, tell us how to dress, tell us what to think, tell us what we have to tolerate and accept. And of course, overall, this is about behavioral control, right? Like Larry Fink says. And this whole thing wraps up with Bill talking to his son, his daughter. And of course, his daughter's wearing the black and white Masonic checkerboard on her dress, because why wouldn't she be? And there's a reason they ended with this. And the 9 out of 10 people who watch this, probably 10 out of 10, won't even get what they're seeing. They'll just get angry at people like me and you. But he's conditioning them into the digital ID like I just showed you. And here he talks to his daughter's son, about how many accounts, this person, the child has on the internet, right? How many accounts do you have? How many, databases are you in? How many systems are you on, right? He tries to sound like an old geeky guy. This is one of the things that they do, these commies do. They try to empower the young people. This is just basic mind control 101 by making the older people sound dumb. So Bill pretends he's like, well, how many systems do you use? When he knows how this whole thing works, he's one of the people who created this, right? So he's like, how many systems do you use? And she's like, what? You mean Facebook and Instagram? He's like, yeah, I don't know, And she talks about how she has spam accounts, right? So she talks about, I have my regular accounts where I influence people. Somehow Bill Gates' daughter influences people, believe it or not, showing bikini pictures, which I won't even show you because I don't want to make you sick. Showing bikini pictures and then talking about a women's right to choose, because of course this is the topic they're all obsessed with. And this boy here, their grandfather was one of the people who founded the parenthood thing, the planned one. They don't mention that, of course, at all. Bill doesn't mention that, why it's so near and dear to him. Of course, human sacrifice is near and dear to these people. But she goes on to talk about accounts, right? And how many accounts they have and spam accounts. And she said, well, you have spam accounts because of this and that. And Bill pretty much makes it sound, he's like, I don't know, because he's getting you prepared to not have spam accounts, getting you prepared to have an account where you're serious, you talk about issues you want, but you can also joke around. You can also post memes and things like that. Of course, as long as it's a meme against God, Jesus, as long as the memes are against people like us, but if you post a meme about them, you'll be put in jail. But listen.
And how many IDs do you typically have on a system? Have multiple personas on the same system.
You mean accounts? Yeah, I do. And then you'll have like a spam one that's like for your like closer friends. It's just like funny stuff that you put up.
Yeah, I hear you, but I'm a serious person.
So very easy to read between the lines with what Bill says at the end, right? He pretends like he doesn't have a resolution. He's like, Lady Bartbeck's like, Bill, you got to come up with something. He's like, I don't know, we're working on it, we're thinking. And everybody out there with the brain knows that this is about the digital ID. This is about the digital ID. And eventually this digital ID is inside of you. But the digital ID is the plan that they've had all along. It's part of the infrastructure change, right? It's about taking your social security card, your passport, all these things, and they're just going to tell you it's like having a digital wall. But really what this is about is everything you post and say online, you're going to be held accountable for. In fact, you think a criminal on the street, eventually people aren't really going to be out in the streets anymore if you didn't notice, because when we have a carbon footprint, we're going to be inside most of the time, kind of like during the outbreak, which was part of the conditioning. So you'll be inside doing stuff on the internet a lot, and they want to hold all your words accountable on the internet, because they don't want you to infiltrate their hive mind, which is what people like me are actually doing, continually infiltrating the hive mind and pulling people out of it. So that's what the plan is, and Bill plays dumb to all of it. I mean, just to recap the stuff that he brings up here. He brings up, again, he's like, oh, you know, I'm planning, hopefully it goes according to plan, having another outbreak, right? And then going into actual conspiracies found on the internet, as if they're all just these crazy things that we're pulling out of our rear ends, right? Oh, Bill Gates about eating bugs. Well, Bill, you have All Things Bugs LLC. Why don't you mention that in the documentary so your audience could see how much money you're investing in people eating bugs? Oh, well, that's not what we're really doing. Is that what you would say? Because, you know, you wouldn't even bring attention to the facts that you're invested in this stuff. Then he goes into the reptilians, of course, and he just laughs these things off. He talks about being immortal, right? And drinking that red liquid, right? Another topic they love to rub in our faces, and even putting stuff in the food, but doesn't mention the fact that he owns so much farmland. Then he tells us about his misinformation team. So here's a billionaire who's barely above ground, who is so obsessed. And this, I mean, they're listening right now at the Bill Gates, Foundation. Probably in between packing the fudge in their factory there, right? Well, hi, everybody out there. How's everybody doing, right? Because you probably already know me. They're like, this voice sounds familiar. The voice that just won't go away, right? No, voice won't go away. So I'm sure, obviously, I'm in their algorithm thing there. They have this probably a lot of money invested in this thing that whenever Bill's name is mentioned, it goes right into their system. They can see what everybody's talking about in regards to Bill. And then Bill can go out and he could just crack jokes about it on national TV, and that's what they do, right? Bill goes on Stephen Colbert, like I talked about. He rubs in hot dogs in your face, doesn't expect you to get it. Then, of course, talks about chips and all this other stuff and just laughs like it's this crazy notion. And then when you see all the biotech that Bill's invested in and what he's trying to do with cattle, with ticks, and all this other, you just go, oh yeah, well, Bill is involved in a lot of this. So Bill needs to know what we're talking about so Bill can keep the sheeple in line. And that's why Bill is obviously doing this. Otherwise, he would say, well, these people are all nuts. I don't have to defend myself. I don't have to protect myself. But they want you to think, oh, well, Bill has to protect himself because people like us are dangerous because we're pointing out what Bill's doing. And if we speak against climate and Bill's sucking carbon out of the air, well, that could be dangerous for the future. How could that be dangerous? Well, millions of people could die in 500 years. Oh, right. How about the fact that millions of people are dying now because they're manipulating the weather and then blaming it on carbon emissions so that you end up having a smart home, having an electric vehicle, and you're under their thumb 24/7 and can't go where you want freely anymore, right? They don't want you to think like that. That's why people like me and you are so dangerous to them. Then, of course, my favorite part, probably the children's book, right? Trying to talk to people like me and you like we're children and we want to be heroes to everyone out there. We want to be monster slayers. And like I said earlier in the video, we just want them to leave us alone. Stop meddling in our lives. And they won't, because this is communism. They don't stop meddling. This is why people have always fought against it. They had to repackage it and call it woke and call it love because they know suckers will fall for it, right? But they give this notion that we're all, we're finding things that aren't there, right? Oh, right. We're finding things that aren't there. These are things that these people are invested in and they're openly promoting, but we're all making it up, right? They show you Hillary Clinton and Bill as witches. Oh, well, there's a lot of stuff that connects them to the occult, including Bill's father, what he was invested in, right? That parenthood thing. Or some of the stuff with Hillary Clinton, what she's involved in, and Kathy O'Brien's book about the things that Hillary's involved in. I mean, we can go on and on and on with the evidence against these people because there's tons of it. There's tons of it. It's always surrounding them. And then they come out and say that we're all making it up. Right? And the sheep will just believe it because they can't do any research other than what the media tells them to believe. That's their research. They get told this is the way it is. Then they go, I researched it. How'd you research it? Oh, CBS told me. Oh, it's great research. Congratulations on being a sheeple. Right? So very interesting that they do that and they use that. But that's how they look at it. They want the other side to look at us like we're children when they're actually the ones who are children, who believe what these liars are telling them and feeding them because they're idol worshiping them. And then, of course, showing you that pizza parlor while all the kids go, don't read it again. That's the stupidest thing we ever heard. Then going in to the whole playground theory, the bully on the playground. How do you control a bully on the playground? Well, at least the bully on the playground, you bring in a parent, right? And who's the parent they're talking about bringing in? Well, the parent they're talking about bringing in is Big Brother. It's Bill. It's all these experts. You know, people who have deemed themselves experts because we're all so stupid. So they could deem themselves experts. The majority of sheeple don't know what they're talking about, so they just go, yep, they must be experts because I don't know what they're talking about. And then people like me who do know what we're talking about get silenced. Because we're bullies, right? And Bill's the authority on that. He's the parent who shows up at the playground. But since I'm the bully, of course, the big thing Bill and all these people care about is making the bully be held accountable. That doesn't mean they don't know who any of us are now as we post. But once they have the digital ID, they can put laws in place that criminalize the things you say online. That's a lot of the stuff they're doing with the school events. It's not just about the red flags. It's about stuff posted online and criminalizing words and thoughts. That's what this leads towards. And the digital ID is the answer. And Bill tells you that at the end of the video in so many words while pretending like he's dumb and doesn't know what this is about. And of course, 99% of the people who watch this, if not 100, will believe Bill. Right? Well, because it's playing to his audience and it's just conditioning them more. But most people don't even understand what they're getting at. And they're going to accept the digital ID because they're going to market it to them. They're not going to tell them they're going to get criminalized for speech. They're going to tell them, well, we can prevent events at schools this way because if we see anything in our algorithm that talks about a school or a weapon of a kid and we have the kid with an ID, well, we could go to their home and arrest them beforehand. And everyone's like, oh yeah, problem, reaction, solution. I don't have a clue. That's the world we live in, folks. Had to cover this for you. I hope you guys will share it with people. I know it was long and a lot, but I felt it was important for people to see some of the stuff and how desperate they are to silence us, discredit us, and mock us, while right to our faces they're admitting their guilt with these duping delight grins on their faces. Unbelievable. I thank everybody for being here. Hope you're all doing well. God bless all of you as always and your families.